Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today on the Rome Waterfront DRI open call for projects. And we're going to begin with a message from Mayor Lanigan. Mayor?
Good afternoon, everyone. Excited to have you here. Check out our plan for the DRI down at our waterfront. This is a very exciting project for the city of Rome. We're really looking forward to hear what ideas you guys have and to bring to our city and make our waterfront an even more enjoyable place for not only our residents, but tourists and everybody else in the region. So please put everything out there. We are not against anything. We love to hear new ideas and hear what other visions people may have. So please be very open, and we're looking forward to what you guys had to do and say.
Thanks, Mayor.
Very welcome.
So next, we're going to introduce the DRI consultants and the state representatives on this call. So hello, everyone. I'm Laura Lorenko. I'm an urban planner with EDR, and I'm the project manager for the consultant team. We have a few different firms on our team, and we're the firm that is supporting the Rome DRI planning process. I'm joined today by my colleague, Aiden.
Hi, everyone.
He'll be moderating this in the background. So if you have any problems, he's going to help drive the show. And Cheyenne?
Hi, I'm Cheyenne Styria. I'm with MRB Group. I'm a Deputy Director of Economic Development for MRB Group, and we are handling some of the background economic analysis and kind of nerdy work behind the scenes, running a bunch of numbers and making sure the data is all in place for a great plan, as well as working with the private project sponsors. So if you have a private project and you're looking to move forward with it or have some questions, get a hold of me, please.
Thanks. And Paul from Department of State.
Hi, everybody. I'm Paul Bankston with the Department of State, work in the Community Economic Development Unit and assist in managing the DRI project as we go through this planning process with the City of Rome.
Thanks, everyone. And as Cheyenne already mentioned, MRB is going to be working with the for-profit sponsors in the planning process, and EDR will be taking the lead as the contact for the public and the nonprofit private project sponsors, and will be supported with some of our other team members, including Ellen Fitzgerald from STC Design, just so you have those names available to you. I'll be taking us through the presentation today with support from everyone on the call, so please jump in with clarifications or additions as I go. I'll begin with a general overview of the DRI planning process, and then I'll take us through the application form for the open call for projects and the small project fund, so you can see both of those processes. And I'll touch on some additional resources for decarbonization and historic preservation. As you'll hear, there's some other webinars and resources specifically for those. And then we'll open up for questions. And first, Aiden's going to give us a quick logistics overview.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah. If you'll see kind of at the bottom of your screen a bunch of icons in your Zoom tray. For the purposes of this webinar, please type your questions as we go in the Q&A box. If you don't see that on your screen now, it's under the More options. You can add it to the tray if you don't see it. During the Q&A session, if you would like to ask your question out loud, you may. We just ask that you raise your hand so we know to call on you. And we can unmute you so you can ask your question. But if you could also just type your questions in the Q&A, that way we can keep a record of all the questions that were asked. And please don't use the chat box unless you have a comment for one of the presenters that it's too loud, too quiet, that sort of thing. But yeah, that's it.
All right, let's get into it. So first of all, congratulations on being the Mohawk Valley Round 9 winner for the DRI program. This is Rome's second DRI. The first one focused on your downtown area. That was in Round 2. We are now in Round 9, and Rome has done it again, and it focuses this year on the waterfront area southeast of downtown. We'll go over that boundary as part of this. So the aim, giving the general background of this program to start, the aim of the DRI program is to fund a range of projects that will support a vibrant, walkable district in this designated area that catalyzes broad economic development and brings numerous economic, social, and environmental benefits. A portion of the award goes toward the planning process to develop a strategic investment plan for the DRI area. And this process is led by a local planning committee with support from New York State agencies, and it's facilitated by an assigned consultant team. So that means our support services are available to Rome and to potential project sponsors as part of this grant, as part of this planning process. The remaining 9.7 million goes to fund projects that will transform Rome's DRI area. So over the next few months, the local planning committee will develop this strategic investment plan with input from the public. And this plan will include detailed project profiles of projects that are recommended by the committee to the state for funding. The state will then review the plan and select which of the projects in it to fund. So I find it helpful to work backwards and first look at what a strategic investment plan looks like so you know what we are working toward. That's our end goal. So I'm going to show you the strategic investment plan from Schoharie. I'm just going to pull this over. And this is our Rome website. If you go to the About page, there are already preloaded up here several general resources and information available to sponsors. We have your winning application. We have the guidebook from the Department of State, some FAQs. We have information on complementary funding opportunities. I'll talk about a match later. So for match sources or for bridge financing, there's some financial resources here. The Small Project Fund. This is detailed information on the Small Project Fund, which I'll touch on. And here we have the Village of Schoharie Strategic Investment Plan. So they were the winner from last year. And then there's some other general information on here. So let's go to the Strategic Investment Plan from Schoharie. And here you can peruse what this looks like. And in section 4, which is the last half of the document, you can scroll through and see the various projects that were proposed as part of Schoharie's investment plan last round and what is included. This is the most recent round, so the profiles will look most like this for Rome as well. There are a few updates this year, but it's very similar. So here, for example, we have an apartment community. This was a private project. This did receive an award from the state. We have the project description, what's included. We have the rendering, existing and proposed conditions. The need and impact, what are those co-benefits? How is this going to be a transformative project? Why is it needed? How is it going to support the downtown area in a way that is advancing the goals of Schoharie in this case? Project sponsor capacity, how it aligns with the strategies. This is something that comes in later. Most of this page comes in later, but it's good to see what we'll need to be adding in. The budget, this is very helpful to refer to how other profiles did the budget. This is where we see the most sort of being tripped up in our proposal submissions here. So very helpful to maybe find a similar project and look at an example budget here when you're filling out the call for projects submission form and the explanation and the different time frame, regulations, etc. So this is a good resource to scroll through. There's also some nonprofit projects in here. There's a library, that one was funded, some public projects as well, parks, etc. So again, if you go to our About page, RomeNYDRI.com About, and you can go here and use that as an example. We don't need the profiles to be at this level by August 14th. As I said, there's a few things that will come in later during the planning process, but it gives you a sense of what we're looking for and the types of information, how to present it, what we'll be going toward. So back to, okay. So as I mentioned, the Rome DRI Local Planning Committee will determine which projects are recommended in the Rome plan. The total amount that they recommend will exceed 9.7 million. That's what's available. So normally there's 13 to 15 million or so worth of projects recommended. And then the state makes the final selection from that list worth $9.7 million. In terms of the schedule, here's a general overview. There's also information in the proposal form. So we're here now. We're at the open call for projects. This is open through August 14th. So first step, submit the project proposal. And then between August and October, there's sort of this back and forth. The public will have an opportunity to comment on the projects being proposed. And the LPC will be working over several meetings, will be working through the project proposals we receive, asking questions, getting comments, getting clarifications. And then there's this process where we're refining the project proposals. We're working with the sponsors and updating them, getting some additional information that isn't required right away, but will be needed for the final proposals, where we go pencils down about mid-October, and then the committee goes into their evaluation process and selects that list of projects that they're going to recommend and include in the plan. So we have proposal, this open call for projects through August, September, mid-October. We're refining, we're answering questions, we're getting more information. Okay, final scopes, everything's locked in. Mid-October, we do the evaluation process. And then in November, October, November, the LPC will choose which projects to include. We might go back to the sponsors at that point and just for final edits to create those profiles that go into the plan. There might be some final questions or edits or information we'll need. And then this gets submitted at the end of the year to the state. They do their own evaluation process and announce which projects are being selected for an award in 2027, in spring, early summer 2027. Then what? So after that happens, the governor will announce which projects will receive a DRI grant out of this plan. Then those projects get assigned to an agency. It's usually, it's either the Department of State, Empire State Development, or Homes and Community Renewal. That depends on the type of project. And then the state staff continue to work with these project sponsors to execute the project agreements, get everything under contract. So that runs through 2027. And we usually start to see these projects starting to get implemented 2028, 2029. So they do need to be ready, feasible, ready to go within a couple of years, since we're looking for them to start being implemented in 2028. Very important to note at this point that the DRI funds are structured as reimbursable grants. So nothing that is spent before the governor makes her announcement to say these are the ones that are awarded, nothing that is spent before that point can be reimbursed. It's only for things after that point. So bear that in mind when you're coming up with your budgets and your matches and how this is structured, you're looking for next spring, early summer as the starting point for spending money. Sponsors can use bridge loans, owner equity, et cetera, to do that, to bridge between when the project's being implemented and when you're being reimbursed for those funds. If you're not awarded, if you go through this process and you do not receive an award or you're not recommended, there's a few other things to mention here. So first of all, there is a designation in the strategic investment plan for other projects. So this is sort of like an honorable mention. It's for projects that the local planning committee liked, but for whatever reason, they're not making a recommendation for them, but they are including them in the plan. Plans that are recommended in the strategic investment plan, but not awarded by the state, or plans that have that sort of honorary mention designation, still have a bit of a competitive advantage for other state funding programs. You've been vetted by the community, you've been endorsed by the community to some degree, so that can give you a leg up for other funding opportunities if you did not receive an award or a recommendation through the DRI. I'll also talk about the small project fund, so projects that are in the strategic investment plan, or if you go through this process and you're not awarded, you're not included, but maybe you can have a smaller version of your project, you have an opportunity to resubmit smaller projects to a small project fund if that is awarded. More about that later. And the DRI is not the only funding program through the state. There are many. The Mohawk Valley Regional Economic Development Council is a very good resource for information on other types of grant programs. And there's a round every year. It's called the Consolidated Funding Application, which is open for funding programs across 10 state agencies, over 30 programs. It's open now. It's usually June, July that it's open. So that's, as I said, an opportunity every year. If you go through, you have all your materials collected for the DRI. It might be something that you can then, but it doesn't get awarded through the DRI. Well, it could be something that you now pursue another type of funding source for that project application. I'm going to pause there. Before I go, next I'm going to go through the form and sort of walk us through what we're looking for in the open call submission form. Before I do that, are there any clarifications from the state, from my colleagues, anything to add on the general overview here of the program? No, we're good? Okay. All right, let me bring this over. So let me show you again, if you go to that website again, and you navigate to, so if we go to the website, you go under open call, all the information for this process is available here. And if you scroll down, you can download our submission form. Let me take you over to that. All projects do have to come through the open call, even if your idea was included in Rome's original application. Even if you're the city of Rome, everyone has to go through the open call to be considered by the local planning committee for inclusion in the strategic investment plan. And you can download this from the website as I just showed you, and then submit either via email or hard copy. So here is the form. Right on the cover page, we have some key information. If you only take away one thing from this webinar, please let it be that you should schedule a meeting with us, with the consultant team, if you are interested in applying, putting in your project idea to this open call as early as possible. Please get in contact with us by emailing your name, your contact information, and a little bit about your project idea to romenydri@gmail.com with the subject line Rome DRI open call, to set up a meeting with EDR or MRB, depending on the type of sponsor that you are. And that will give us an opportunity to meet with you early, hear your idea, and walk you through and give you some support early on to get your application together. We strongly recommend that. So please write that down and this email as a key next step. We are available beyond that as well for sponsor support, as I was sort of noting before. We're here throughout the whole planning process, working with sponsors to bring these project profiles, ideas together to help the LPC evaluate them and to get them into that strategic investment plan. This provides a little more detail on the time frames and deadlines I went over earlier. The open call, there's some other webinars, which I'll talk about coming up. We have a public workshop. It's not scheduled yet. It'll be in August. The first public workshop, which gives general information about the program. And then at these third and fourth meetings with the LPC, that's when we're doing that initial project review. We're getting comments. There'll be another open house where the public can comment on the project ideas we receive through the call. And then here's that sort of pencils down deadline, mid-October, where we need your final scope of work, the decarbonization scope, the detailed budget, proof of funding, and additional supporting documentation, so that the committee has everything that they need to do their evaluation, which is happening mid-October into November, and to go through everything in detail and then select which ones they will be recommending. So keep an eye, that's outlined here in the plan on this timeline, in the form rather. This we're going through. Something to point out here is we do recommend engaging an architect or a design professional to help you put your project proposal together. This will really give you an advantage. You'll need to be pulling together a rendering, detailed budgets, different supplemental materials and supporting documents, and having a design professional supporting you will be very advantageous, very helpful in this process. We will be available to work with them and advise them on what's needed in the process as well. You can put us in touch with that person as we go along. Okay. So in terms of project types and requirements, most of the projects that I think the folks on this webinar will be putting forward fall under the new development or the rehabilitation of existing buildings category. Public improvement is mostly for city, it's really the city projects. Small project fund I'll talk about separately. Branding and marketing is usually through the city as well, though sometimes this is maybe a chamber of commerce or a private, another type of private or nonprofit agency. So if you're thinking about this and you have questions, you can ask us about that in your pre-application meeting as well. But mostly through the call, we're seeing the applications to for these new developments or rehabilitation projects. What things that are not eligible, so I should say these are capital development. They're showing sort of transformative impacts on the DRI area. They're providing co-benefits and jobs or housing or services, something transformative for the area. The DRI program does not accept or fund planning activities, anything related to operations and maintenance, pre-award costs. Those are money that was spent before the award announcement next year. Property acquisition is not eligible to be funded with DRI funds. However, there's a little exception here. It can be included as part of your match. It can be included in your overall project budget if it's recent, if it's relevant to the project, but it has to be funded by another source. So this is a little bit of an exception to that pre-award cost rule. Also, other ineligible expenses, training program expenses, and expenses related to existing programs. In terms of project requirements, I'll speak about the location in a minute. I mentioned the timing. It should be feasible, ready to go in a couple of years to implement. We are looking for, these capital projects that are large enough size and scale to really be transformative for that waterfront DRI area. And the LPC has set a minimum total project cost, not DRI ask, but total project cost of $250,000. If you have a smaller project in mind, you might be a good candidate for the small project fund. If you have questions on this or think you have a smaller project, but you really think it would qualify as a DRI, please contact us and we can sort of talk through options there, work through that with you. In terms of project funding, I mentioned a match. So for private, the for-profit sponsors, there's a minimum match requirement of 40% of the total project cost. So 60% DRI, 40% of your own funds. For ESD sponsored programs or contracted programs, there's a 10% equity requirement as well. So these are some details that we would talk through with you in your pre-application meeting. For public and nonprofit projects, there is a minimum match of 20% of the total project cost. Again, caveat, if you have questions or you don't think you can't meet these minimums, please contact us. We'll talk through that with you. But this is the sort of standard that the LPC has set. If you can provide a match above and beyond that, that will make your proposal even more competitive. Something to note here is that other public funds can be used for your match. You can stack different capital sources and different grants. So if you have a Restore New York grant, or if you have historic tax credits, or you have a cultural grant, those can count towards your match, even though it's also from a public source. For project sponsors, you do have to be some sort of legal entity with the capacity and legal authority to undertake the proposed project. So it cannot just be Laura Lorenco. It has to be, Lorenco LLC or Lorenco 501c3. You have to be an entity. If you don't have one yet, you still have time to form one. We can talk to you about that as well. But just a note there that you do have to be a legal entity as a project sponsor. And I'll speak about building decarbonization as well, but there's some information right here in the form where you can also find that information. In terms of the location, we have here the boundary of the DRI area. You can see Fort Stanwix there in downtown. And then this is following East Dominic Street, and it goes down to the Erie Canal. There's Bellamy Harbor and the Mohawk, Erie Boulevard and Erie Canal, Mohawk River. This area is where you need to be within this area to be eligible to be a DRI project and receive DRI funding, or small project funding has to be within this boundary. A couple caveats. If you are outside of this boundary, the LPC does have the authority to make minor changes to this boundary. As part of the DRI program, it does need to be compact and walkable, so we can't be going a mile out. We can't make major revisions to this boundary, but minor revisions are permitted. So if you have a great idea for a project, but you're a little bit outside of this boundary, we still encourage you to apply. And there's a spot on this form where you can explain, you can sort of justify why you think, you should be part of this program. And the LPC is able to make minor changes with cause, with justification. Included in here, we also have the draft DRI vision for the Rome waterfront. So we are looking for projects that will advance this vision. The public will be commenting on this. We'll be updating it a bit. We'll be adding community goals, but for our purposes for the open call, please use this as a reference point of, how explaining how your project would advance the vision of the community. And the state DRI goals are here. That's also part of the evaluation process. We don't have the Rome community goals yet, but this is definitely our starting point. So please refer to these. This also gives you some information on the project evaluation criteria that will be used. So again, having that transformative catalytic effect on the area, that project readiness, that financial readiness is going to be really important for us to look at. You're well developed and able to proceed in the near term. It's a responsible use of public funds, and you're bringing these benefits beyond just your project or your site. You're really, providing jobs, economic activity, or contributing to the tax base, improving services, quality of life. You're providing those broader benefits. Okay, so here we are at the application form itself. As you go through, you'll select which type you are. Again, it's mostly going to be these two, new development or redevelopment and renovation. You'll put your sponsor information in here and any other co-sponsors or contact folks we should have. Your address or location. And if you're outside the boundary, here's where you can provide that explanation and justification. Then we're asking for some background information on the existing conditions of your project, of your site, of your building. What's there? What is the need for this? What is for this project? And maybe anything that's been done, that's relevant previously for this project. Then we're asking for the description of what the project is, what that DRI project is, what you're looking for funding for specifically, the part that maybe you have multiple phases, but what's the phase, what's the project that you are including here for funding for DRI support, the future use, the goals, the size, when you can quantify things, please quantify them. We ask you to put the square footage right here. And that's the square footage of the project. So if you have a 10,000 square foot building, but the project is relating to the first floor, please give us the square footage of the first floor that the project's going to be on. You can tell us the square footage of the whole building, but we do need that as project specific square footage as well. And the different types of activities that will be completed. So here you put in the square footage, you can check off what types of activities are included, and then there's space for you to give us that full description. Bearing in mind these pieces we're asking for up here. You can expand here on how it's aligning with the community vision and the state goals in this location. Property ownership, if you are the owner, you can state that the sponsor is the owner. You do need to have site control as one of the criteria to be a DRI project. In some cases, the sponsor is different from the owner. So this is the opportunity to sort of explain what the legal authority you have. There needs to be some legal agreement for you to do this project on this site. So telling us who the owner is and what agreement you have in place to continue. Capacity to prior experience that you have had in similar work or loans, grants you've administered previously, different types of projects you've undertaken that are similar, especially if you have any experience with state grants, or maybe this is your second DRI, a prior DRI, or a prior New York Forward program. There's an opportunity to explain this here. this is where it can be helpful to refer to the Schoharie Strategic Investment Plan and see sort of what we're looking for there and how other people have described their experience. If there are any partner entities that are going to be helping directly in the project, so say you're a theater and you're renovating your theater, we're not necessarily looking for you to say, well, I'm going to have ballet class. This person teaches ballet and this person is going to, run programs. Great. But we're looking more for this is going to be our direct bridge financer, and this person's is our architect or somebody who's really directly helping you with that renovation project that you're doing, rather than, sort of the future general partners, who's your specific partners on the project, is what you can provide the information for here. Now we get into the cost estimate. So here you'll fill out the total cost and how much of that you're asking for the DRI. Please bear in mind those minimums and matches that I mentioned earlier. They're outlined here as well. And there's a description of how to fill out the budget table, which is on the second page. So you see we're asking you to describe, quick, short description of each activity, how much each activity costs, what the funding source is, and then the status. And there's 4 options to choose from: secured, anticipated, requested, or undetermined. And this here gives an explanation of what those categories mean. Reminder that it's reimbursable, so only include the costs that you're going to be expending as part of this project after the award, nothing that you're planning to do beforehand. If you have, it's pretty common that you might be splitting an activity between multiple funding sources. That's fine. Just break it down for us. So you can say, construction, and that's going to be $10,000 requested from DRI and $5,000 from a matching grant and $2,000 from cash. And just break that down for us. We'll be able to see what you're doing there. Then you can explain if you have it in hand, if it's secured, anticipated, requested, or undetermined. Optional, you can give us some explanation of activities if you want some more space to explain more activities. You can add rows to this if you need to, or to give us some background on costs that are funds that are anticipated or undetermined, why that is, or what you have or what you don't have at this point. Colleagues on the call or on the webinar, anything to add on the budget? Anything we want to call out here? Okay. Again, that strategic investment plan from Schoharie is a good reference point if you want to see how others have done it. This is a place just to let us know how these costs were determined. If you have a third-party contractor or yourself, how those were arrived at. And the status of the non-DR funds and timeline for obtaining them. So that's actually where you'd put in the description of things that you don't have in hand yet, but you anticipate. Project readiness and time frame for implementation is the several pages here. This is quite important. So this is for us to understand the readiness, the financial resources that you have, if you've done the feasibility, if you've done any studies or business plans, preliminary site design, anything like that. You can describe where you are, where the project is at this point. If you're on the National Historic Register of Places, if you know, we'll talk about that next. And then the proposed timeline, you can fill this in. There's some space if you have things that aren't covered here. You can add some more information on milestones and timeframe. If there are any environmental investigation or cleanup needed, your DRI area does overlap with the Rome Brownfield Opportunity Area. There are some brownfields in the vicinity. So if that applies to your site, this is where you can explain if there's any cleanup needed, any known contamination, etc. Any permits or approvals that you know about at this point that the project will require, we can also assist with that. Challenges or issues that might affect the project. So that is the application. We will also need, eventually, various supplemental materials. If you have them at this point, please do submit what you have. even if it's draft or, preliminary. If you can submit images, renderings, certainly of existing conditions, and if you have future conditions as well, cost estimates, quotes, letters of support from financial institutions, anything you can get to us, we will eventually need that. So please check off what you are including as supporting material, and you can send those with your application. If it's a very large file, we'll work with you through that email. Just be in touch with us to make sure we can get it. If it's confidential, please label it as confidential. So we're treating that a little bit differently. And then there's a certification page for signatures, and the submission instructions are here again. They're also on the website. So you can submit this application, this filled out form, and your supporting materials to our project email, romnydri@gmail.com, or you can submit it as a hard copy by either mailing it or hand delivering it to City Hall. Please note City Hall does close at 4:30. The deadline is 5, but if you're getting it in hard copy, it does need to be there before they close at 4:30 on the 14th. And just make sure that it's legible, no text is getting cut off, that we're getting all the information you want us to. Okay. I'm going to go to small project form first, but pausing there. Anything to add? Any clarifications on the form process? Nothing? Okay.
You're doing great, Laura.
So, small project fund. As I mentioned, there is an option. Most communities do apply for this, not all, where a community can apply for as a project, a small project fund project to HCR, and these are typically up to $600,000, and it becomes a locally administered fund that once it's awarded, then smaller projects up to, I think it's $100,000. 125, I can get the number, can apply. 150,000 is the max for the small project fund. But smaller projects can apply to that locally administered fund. It has its own open call process after it's awarded. That would happen in 2027, 2028. So what we need to do at this point is demonstrate demand for this fund. If Rome would like to request one of these, apply for one of these, we do need to demonstrate that we have demand for. If we're asking for $600,000, then we should show demand for 1.2 million to say, we really, if we get this, we can really use this money and put it to good use. So in parallel with the open call for projects for those standalone DRI projects, those larger transformative ones of 250,000 or more, there's also an opportunity to submit a letter of interest. It's much simpler to the small project fund to demonstrate that we have that demand. So that is also on the website. If you go, actually, there's a screenshot right here. If you go on the open call, there's this little orange box and it says, hey, if you're looking for the small project fund, you can download the Word template right here and fill that in. That looks like this. So you'll just go through. The boundary still applies. You need to be within the boundary. Again, if you're nearby, feel free to send it in and note that you're nearby. But the final boundary will be also applicable to that small project fund. Submission procedure is the same. You can email it or you can submit it in hard copy. There's information on the form for the types of activities that are eligible. So these tend to be building renovations, sprucing up your facade, doing some public art is also eligible under this small public art projects. If you're doing, business expansion, business improvement, those types of things. So that's spelled out here, the types of residential, upper story residential improvements, the types of eligible activities, and then what's not eligible: fences, parking lots, landscaping, not eligible. There would be a match requirement for this as well. There's a 25 minimum, at least a 25% match requirement for the small project fund should it be awarded. So you can see if it fits the bill. If you have questions on whether you're eligible or not, that's also something that the consultant team can work through with you or get clarification on. And this is a pretty simple, this is where I am, this is my idea, this is my, estimated total project cost and a simple budget, the types of activities I'm looking for, name, address, signature. And that goes to us, and we'll try to demonstrate $1.2 million worth of demand for this small project fund. So it could be something that the city goes after. Anything to add on the small project fund, anyone? Okay, last but not least, this is public money, it's public state money, and so there are a few requirements that public awards do need to adhere to. There's some standard contracting ones. If you have questions on that, we can discuss those with you. But the sort of overarching ones for this program are decarbonization, and there's also a historic preservation review process. And these are most impactful to the scopes. So we want to make sure that you're aware of it and you're getting ahead of it. And we're talking through this with you early on to understand, how this could impact your scope and your costs. So for decarbonization, this would apply to any projects over 5,000 square feet that are new construction, including building additions. So if it's new, it's over 5,000 square feet, it will require decarbonization pathways, and I'll speak to that next. If you're renovating a space, there's a couple boxes that you'd have to check to qualify. So you'd have to be over 5,000 square feet, the project area, and you'd have to be doing a substantial removal or replacement, so like over 50% of two or more of these items, your thermal envelope, interior, exterior, windows, your HVAC, your space conditioning equipment, water heating, lighting, etc. So there is a dedicated consultant team for the DRI program statewide that specializes in supporting project sponsors to determine if you qualify for decarbonization and to guide you through what pathway you can take to meet those requirements if you are required to include decarbonization measures in your project. We operate as a liaison to them, so you'll start working with us, and then we'll connect you with them, and they will take you through if you do need to meet these, do have decarbonization requirements, what makes most sense for your project. This is a quick snapshot of the three pathways. There is a separate webinar on this, and like I said, separate resources to go through which ones might be best for your project. But quickly, one is going through the Energy Code credits, New York State Energy Code credits. Another one is the Energy Star pathway, or there's third-party certifications. We're expecting number one to be most popular, but it really depends on what you're doing. The second piece that we'll be looking at this year is that New York State Historic Preservation Office review. So projects receiving public money would need to go through SHPO review if they are subject to SHPO technical review. This includes buildings located in a historic district, which shouldn't really apply to this area, but if you're a designated building or you're a site that's listed as eligible for designation, you might be subject to technical review. So the SHPO office is coming in this round to provide some preliminary comments on proposed projects to make sure that scope would be compatible, make sure it's not a non-starter, right? So there's a process of review for that if you would qualify, and we'll be helping you determine if you qualify. There's a CRIS system and connecting you with SHPO for that preliminary review to make sure your scope would be compatible with that technical review. As I said, there are additional webinars on these, and we recommend that you mark these down and plan to attend. So the first is for the decarbonization webinars. There's one on August 11th. This is before our call closes at 11 a.m. There's registration links on our website and on the open call form. This is the same webinar. There's two opportunities to join. If you could get on the one before our call closes, that would be most useful, I would think. And then the historic preservation webinar is going to be on August 20th. If you are interested in decarbonization and not necessarily required to do it, of course, you can still do it. And this webinar is a good resource really for anyone to understand the sort of options and resources out there for reducing your carbon footprint. Okay, so that is everything. I'm going to remind everyone that a great next step is reaching out to us and scheduling that pre-application meeting. And a reminder of how to do that is on the screen. And now I'm going to open it up for questions. And Aiden, if any have come in, we can start with those first. And then if you have any more, please put it in the Q&A box or raise your hand. And well, please put it in the Q&A box regardless. You can also raise your hand and ask your question directly. Aiden, have any come in?
Nothing's come in. No.
Okay. I was either very thorough or or just very confusing. So is this a good sign or? We're gonna give it one more minute. Shan, anything to add or emphasize from what I've just gone through for private sponsors?
Call us, email us, talk to us as soon as possible if you have an idea on a project, no matter how far down the road it is. It'll save you and the city and everyone a bunch of time if we just have a conversation as soon as possible. Let us help you along the way.
Yes, we are free support, so please take advantage of it. Paul, anything to add? All right. Well, if you think of a question afterwards, you know how to get in touch with us. We're going to be looking out for your emails to schedule those meetings. This webinar will be posted on the website, so you can refer to it again. And for others that you know that weren't able to attend this live webinar, the recording will be there for them to review as well, so we can pass that around. We do have a question. Okay, in case of renovating the harbor wall, which is owned by Canal Corps, does DRI apply? Yes, sort of. The one of the projects that the city is looking at, and it was part of the application, and it's one that they're considering moving forward with, relates to the harbor wall. So there is New York State Canal Corps owns it, but then the city has permissions to use it. So there are ways that we could be looking at that if the city would like to move forward with something there. So that is potentially in the mix, and there would be a way forward. I can't speak for them for the city at this point and say exactly what they'd like to move forward with, but it's possible to do something on that Canal Corps land, depending on what it is. Yes. In terms of the match, I mentioned using Restore New York toward the DRI match, and do I have more detail on that? So that was a real example. Projects have used matching grants. So there was a case where a project had received an ESD Restore New York grant for a piece of something, and then they came in and put in for DRI funding to, I don't know if they were expanding the project or just additional match, because there's different match funds for different funding applications. So there's a couple different ways to go about this if you have some funding in hand for part of a project, you could come in now and ask for the DRI funding to fill your funding gap. You could, or you could potentially say, hey, this is the funding that I have, and I'm going after this other funding as well. It's easier, of course, if you have it more secured than if you might need to wait a year or so. That can be challenging, but that is an option. We do see that with tax credits, for example, where there's the rounds happen at specific times per year. So if you're waiting for the September round for your tax credits, then you put in your application for this much DRI, and you say 5% is going to be coming from, we're applying for this grant for 5% of the cost pending, this determination in September, October, etc. Would anyone else like to elaborate on sort of different strategies for capital stacking and matching, getting that match through other sources? No one? Okay. It depending on your project, we can kind of give you some real world examples of how similar projects have maybe come up with other funding. There's some resources on our about page that I pointed out that you could scroll through, but if you reach out to us and you have that idea, we could sort of guide you on bridge financing options potentially, or capital stacking financing options that might be relevant for the project that you're considering. All right. We'll leave it there. Thank you everyone for attending, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Have a good day.